school, that is fifth standard. And 172 million children will not go to college. Imagine what this means to our country. The enormity of the statistics is worrisome, troubling, and should be making you angry. And let's not forget that the quality of education received in all schools is not equal. It varies. It varies depending on gender. It varies depending on mindsets and values. It varies depending on geographical location. City, village changes. It also varies depending on your socioeconomic status. But what if we ensured that all children get high quality education? Just imagine what this means to a nation that has nearly 2/3 of its population younger than 35, us. Our future is in those schools. Your future is in those schools. Can you imagine how well it would be for corporations and industries to hire employees that are innovators and independent thinkers? Imagine a workforce that has its basics so strong that learning new ideas and concepts is accepted and encouraged. It's a known fact that at least 75% of our new hires or college graduates are not industry ready. The change, the strength that we want to see in our companies, in our life, and in our India will happen if all children get excellent education. But in the meantime, our short-term theory of change starts from the place where the children are, the classrooms. I've been given a great education opportunity, and I recognize that. I was born here in Chennai. I grew up in Jakarta, Indonesia, and then I went on to the US to get my Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering from Purdue University. I then worked there in the US for 3 years as a design and development engineer. I quit my job, and I joined Teach for India. What is Teach for India? What is the idea behind the fellowship? So the mission of Teach for India is to create a movement of leaders to eliminate educational inequity. And how is this done? Through the fellowship, and I'm a fellow, where India's most promising college graduates and high-performing young professionals are recruited and selected to teach in a low-income community school for these 2 years. We are essentially full-time primary school teachers for these 2 years. And what does this do, you can ask? What does the fellowship do? It helps us, the fellows, understand the stark realities of what is wrong with our education system for our country. For us to witness the powerful impact that we can have as a teacher in a classroom and use that knowledge to go make a difference in the rest of the country, that is what this helps us. Some of our alumni have gone on to start their own charter schools. Some of them have written their IAS exams to join the government. And 65% of our alumni are now working in the education sector, either directly or indirectly. I personally was not aware of all the issues that our education system has till I started teaching. And there's a lot of pieces to solving. It's just not one silver bullet that can solve it. Teacher training, better teacher compensation and recognition, improved infrastructure, and definitely capable leaders in admin and bureaucracy. Personally, after this, if I decide to start working in the education sector, the community project that I'll do at the end of my 2 years will help me understand what the community needs, what our children needs, and what India needs. That is a long-term theory of change that we want to see. Mobilize the Teach for India alum to make a greater impact, where the ripple effect will start being seen all over the country. How has this experience been for me so far? Teaching is the toughest thing I've ever done in my life. It shakes you fundamentally. It's a very nice Swades romantic story to hear. Oh, you teach in a low-income community school? That's awesome. You're giving back to the community. But it's so physically challenging and mentally challenging. It tires me every single day. The incessant power cuts, 7 hours of standing and teaching, the poor infrastructure where sudden rains provide my school with a pool, and it's a dirty water pool, no chlorine for sure. And then, of course, not to mention the daily differentiated lesson plans and the correction of papers. A teacher's work is non-stop. But why do I and 500 other fellows do this every day? The children. The stark truth that my kids, my 4th standard students, are in kindergarten level compared to the peers in English and maths who study in private schools is shocking. How could we have allowed this as a nation? How can we let this happen? Children that think, dream like their peers do not get the basic requirements like education, hygiene, and infrastructure to meet those goals. They want to become artists. They want to become engineers. They want to become IAS officers, pilots, businessmen, doctors. but they're just not given the same opportunities that I was given, and maybe that you were given. This fellowship has made me realize that my role as a teacher and a role of a teacher goes beyond the lesson plans and paper correction. My kids deal with issues of drunken fathers, absent mothers, immoral relatives, and come from abject poverty. Death is another happening for them. Rain means to move their entire family from their house to a stadium. So what can I do in return? What can I, as a primary school teacher, do in return? I can provide a safe classroom where the learning experience is valuable and memorable. I, as a teacher, will have to start guiding them to start having goals, but also to start realizing what effort needs to be made to start making that. Fourth standard seems early, but it's already too late. They've wasted 3 years of their life. Children, if given a chance, do wonders. Mine do every day. All they want from a teacher is a chance to shine and excel. And that is what I and all the other fellows strive to do. Providing consistency for students, providing quality education, that is the key for change. What seemed like a ridiculous effort when I started, I thought this was not possible. Teaching kids was going to be impossible. Now seems possible. And that is what I mean by sense of possibility. After being in school for 3 months, I see the powerful impact a dedicated and committed teacher can make. The children notice it too. They recognize the need to work hard. They recognize the need to study. They want to be challenged intellectually, someone that will allow them to ask why, so that they can ask why the sky is blue. Why is Earth around the sun? Why can't we get closer to the sun? Questions that maybe I was not allowed to think as a child. They eat lunch quick. They stay back in class. They want to do their tables. They want to learn new words from the word chart. They read the newspaper not knowing the meaning, but they come and ask me. And that is progress. My best feedback or performance review I've ever had working in a company was a note from one of my students on Teachers' Day. And it said, "Sir, before you come, Sheila no read tables. Now Sheila reads 6 tables." Children know the growth. They realize that they're learning. They know that growth is happening. And that is what we need to do. Imagine that I'm one person. If I, as a teacher, can make a difference in a classroom, imagine what 500 fellows in a classroom can do. If I can do it, so can you. And if you can, your friends and peers, your family, then your companies can start making a difference. And then you start seeing the change, the city, the state, and then our country. The phrase sense of possibility is very misleadingly simple. It's just like an idea. It seems very easy. But it needs to be believed with strong passion that yes, we can change the state of education in our country. Yes, we can ensure all children go to school, but also they receive high quality education. It's not just about numbers. It's about what value and what knowledge they learn in that class. It's a long struggle and battle. People have been doing it for a long time, but now the awareness has started increasing. But it is possible. It needs to be for our children's sake, for our sake, for our country's sake. I fight the battle every day in a classroom. You can help us as well. Support individuals and youngsters that want to tackle this problem head on. Encourage them. Support youngsters to join fellowship. Support organizations that want to make children's education empowerment the lead or the main goal. Work with your company's CSR initiatives to provide and fund organizations that want to make teaching an aspirational profession. If you're in college, think of what you can do on your weekends. Think of how much struggle you've had during college, what things you wish you had learned, how the next generation would value from it. Demand better education for all children. Do not stop with just one school. Demand better for all children. Demand better teaching quality and help achieve that quality. Then I'm sure that our great country will have a day where we have eliminated educational inequity. Thank you.
Wow, young Indians, I think you have been faced with a challenge. I think he's thrown the gauntlet down, and I'm sure we can rise to that. We are opening the floor for questions. We don't have a lot of time because our next session is about to start. So I will open the floor for about 3 questions. If you have them, mics are going around. I'm sure we have a lot of very inspired audience members today. So can I have a question from the audience? Bit dumbstruck with your speech. But still, come on, let's ask some good questions. There we go.
Good morning, all. This question is to Mr. Vishwanathan. Uh, he was saying that we should allow the children to select what they want to pursue in their career. Again, going by the statistics, if you ask 100 children what they want to do, probably 90 of them will say pilot or engineer or doctor, that's it. So it's very difficult for a children to understand what they want to become or what they are capable of. Okay, it is only the planners who has to decide what is better for them and how the learning has to be given to those children. So this is my view. Why was that you said that we should allow children to select what they want to become?
Just to clarify, I don't think I said children should be allowed to select their careers. I said children should be allowed to choose what they want to learn. So
what they learn is what
no, let
become.
me right at the second and third standard level. We want, after saying that the basics of language, so your ability to learn or your ability to absorb input, whether the input is coming from books, whether the input is coming from television, whether the input is coming from newspapers, magazines, or whatever be the source, that I can actually read and understand. So to that extent, communication has been established for me to absorb information or knowledge in whichever way that I want. Right at the third standard or fourth standard level, the practical situation is that children make very, very good choices if you give them guidance and if we don't kind of thrust certain patterns and structures on them. This may seem, to an adult brain, this does seem like, really can I trust this kid? But I think ultimately the thing is that you need to spend time. And then you need to actually, see, I am not at all an educator. My life has been one of international business for a long time until this transformation happened. And my learning is from sitting in hundreds of classrooms because I do not have any qualifications. Sitting in these hundreds of classrooms has made you realize that actually all that is needed is mature guidance and a respect for the child's intelligence. Once those two things are in place, and you are not, I agree with you that, aspirational situations like everybody wants to become a pilot, everybody wants to become a cricketer, these are natural tendencies, but they grow beyond these tendencies. Actually, they do. It is the more instructed children who have these kind of narrow goals because these have been inspired by the adults rather than discovered by the children themselves. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you.
Hello, sir. This is Venkatakrishnan here. We are not giving importance to innovation in our education system. That's what I feel.
Who is your question to, sir?
Mr. Vishwanath. Okay. When I studied, my teacher said, follow whatever I said, no questions. So my daughter is studying now, same. So the students are not allowed to think out of box or there is no place for thinking actually. So innovation will happen only when the thinking is taking place. No. So we are not giving importance in our education system for innovation. So what can we do for that?
I don't think I have a simple answer, which is why I said that when I talk about reimagining the whole thing, how do you set the stage for innovative thinking to happen right at the early stage, is something where you have to foster more and more independent thought, which right now, as we say, the adult mindset is something where we do not seem to trust our children with the ability to do this on their own. The moment we start looking at it with a slightly more open mindset, innovation is the natural way that we are. Innovative is the natural way that we are. The process is what kind of slowly eliminates it. So the whole idea is, can you just remove the structure in the process, at the same time have your skeletal framework at as minimal a framework as possible, and so that there is some structure. It is not as if it is completely let loose and chaotic, but that within that there is enough room to maneuver, enough room to play, enough room to innovate. And so if you do not take innovation away, innovation is the natural way that we are. So that is really so I don't have an answer to saying that, okay, in the current system, yes, I agree with you. But I think that that's what a lot of people are battling now in terms of, I think there's a lot of thinking going on along these lines. It is just that the thinking process or the thought process is not large enough yet. And it needs to kind of cascade into something much bigger than what it is today.
I'd like to add on, add on to a couple of points to that. There's a lot of innovation so-called innovation happening, no? Audiovisual learning and colorful content and many other things. If you see actually the data, right, teacher is still and will always be the kingpin of the class. An inspired teacher with enough freedom can bring in all the great innovation. Basically, the teacher will open the mind of the child. Right now, the teachers are, majority of them are constrained by, as they see it as a work, like I said, as a secure job and stuff, and they're given a set of instructions, you have to complete these things, the checklist, and just like a factory. It's actually like a factory, right? And they push the kids along. So there are 100 things we can do, but I think one thing which will create phenomenal impact is to have inspired teachers, respect for the teachers in the country, and give them enough freedom. That will change a lot of other things than crores of money has been put into computer-based learning and audiovisual learning. I think a small portion is given to the teachers. I think it will have 100 times better impact.
So last question. Yeah, this gentleman here.
My question's for all the panelists. I mean, all of you spoke about the sort of futile things that we teach our children in terms of, calculus and this thing. So with your experience, what are some of the roadblocks, mental blocks you face, speaking to stakeholders? Because everybody agrees this present stuff doesn't work. I mean, industry says most of what we teach these kids, they're not able to translate it. Kids themselves don't enjoy what they're learning. Teachers don't enjoy. So what is the mental block? Why are we still continuing with this Macaulay system of education? What is this thing?
So I think the mental block comes from just the fact that we don't trust our children. We don't trust independent learning. We don't trust independent education. And unfortunately, as we grow older, we are worried about being questioned a lot. So what happens is we think, and the learning calculus, learning all of that, which is very valid, I think you must ask the industries why we don't use it on a daily basis. I think learning it is essential, it's very important, but the practical knowledge of how to use it, we never teach it. We can use probability and statistics when you're sitting in an auto worrying about how much gas is being consumed by cars not turning off their engines, but the problem is we were never told you can use this at this moment in this life. There was no reality, like how when we're teaching addition, we say I have 5 chocolates, I give you 3, how much do I have left? We teach addition like that, but we never give like the practical application of something that's very conceptual. And I think that itself is the fundamental to say why we're not industry ready. And the same thing is, it's just unhealthy competition that we've somehow fostered it, saying you need to do this, like the way he mentioned. 12th standard pass, you have to choose science, you're so limited to your career options. There's nothing wrong. If a kid wants to be like a pilot when he's young, by the time he grows older, he's going to start getting interested in engineering, mechanical engineering, or something else. He can work for marketing of some. There's just you need to start relating what you learn in school to real life applications. And I think the onus is back on professors, teachers, and curriculum, and educators to be able to make that more valuable.
I believe less is more, right? The less you learn and learn it by complete understanding. We cram the children with, you see the kind of textbook, they can't even carry it, right? The amount of weight you have, and on 3rd standard, 4th standard, we see the syllabus of CBSE or even matriculation. They kind of mug a lot of things, but understanding is very little. But if we go by a thing which is less is more and teach them very few fundamental concepts, make them very strong, and make sure that they don't cross unless they understand the basics. Right now, like even you get 50%, 40%, 60% pass, you're pushed to. But I believe that you need to be 100% in every understanding, right? And because what happens, that builds your foundation. We focus on that, I think our mental blocks towards learning, understanding concepts can clear much faster.
Thank you, all the panelists, for spending an hour of your time with us this morning. Young Indians focuses on education, and I'm delighted we started this conference with the first conversation on education and a lot of challenges that this audience will hopefully think about as we start our work towards solving some of them. I'd like to welcome our next speakers. We are ready to go on to our next session. So thank you all very much. Have a very good day.
Good morning. Indeed, for me personally, very happy to be standing here for a VIA event after a gap of a few months. It feels like homecoming in many ways. First, I'll welcome our esteemed guest for this session, Mr. Shripati. I will introduce him just after I give a few remarks to context set this session, even though I think the context and the issue will be dealt and spoken by our guest, because I think he is the right man in a right place with the right experience, with great exposure. As I was just telling him, moral leadership, a very standing tall sort of a topic for the morning, something which our generation is facing, is realizing, is facing the heat of it every day, not sure if we understand it, not sure if we know how to deal it, but we have been placed in a context which is extremely complex. The world is watching us. We make tall claims to the world, but seem to be standing low in some of those standards. Few questions as I was taking my flight in the morning from Coimbatore. Is morality, is morals something internal? Is it something which comes from your heart and mind and soul, or is it an external standpoint? That is something which I was starting to think, because you have to get to deeper aspects, because the word moral itself is extremely deep. India's greatness in the past, of course, has been its trade with the Romans and the entire world, the Silk Route, but its true standing and leadership in the world has been through its wisdom, through its spirituality, through its knowledge, through its leadership in other contexts. But today, we are running after the money, we have the muscle, but somewhere it looks as if we have lacked in moral leadership, or at least showcasing it. As I said, India has the muscle, and that muscle is today young Indians. The whole world is talking about you and me, is talking about the demographic dividend, the advantage, the greatness India has, but the world is also worried that if this demographic dividend, population, greatness that India has can go a little wrong. So this is somewhere that our generation is put on a spot where we cannot just keep quoting Gandhi or Vivekananda or the Vedas and get away with it. We seem to be living in a reality which is full of contradictions. So how do you showcase it? I don't think we can blame a generation in the past, because we seem to be the greater in number. Saying all this, I won't take more time. Mr. Shripati today is in a extremely important position as the State Information Commissioner. Many months ago, when he was Chief Secretary of Tamil Nadu, I had heard that he was from Coimbatore, but I wasn't sure. Tried Googling this morning, as I just told him, but I'm very proud that both of us have Coimbatore origin. He studied in Coimbatore initially, so I'm extremely happy to be sharing the dais with him. Officer of the Indian Service who of very high ranking and great experience. I'm not going to read through everything. I'm sure you have the details with you, but what I want to tell you is the experience is varied. Experience is geographically varied and topically varied, because he's been in urban development, in an urban environment, in highways, in higher education, in youth of welfare and sports. He's been in minerals and been the State Vigilance Commissioner. Why I say a few of these things is because you know the depth of knowledge and the width of exposure that he will have. Not taking more time, I will invite Mr. Shripati to talk to us about his thoughts on the topic of moral leadership and the context and the times in India. After he finishes, we will have a few questions for him, and we'll have a discussion on that. Thank you very much.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think the CII and the young Indians have chosen the most appropriate time to talk issues which are quite relevant today in the current ambience. In fact, the concept paper which has been given to me identifies India with Liberia, tied with Liberia, etc., etc. It is sad but true. You open the newspapers or switch on the TV and you'll see or read or whatever you read, I do not want to elaborate on. So nothing can be more appropriate than the youth, the young Indians take the situations under their control and give India a leadership which will have moral authority, which means the moral leadership. In fact, I think I entered the room when the previous session was just closing. I happened to hear a couple of sentences about the educational system. A couple of sentences included our children learning by rote. There is no overall development. There is no personality development, which was part and parcel of our systems in the past. In fact, Shankar was mentioning about the morals. Where have we lost? And it's very appropriate that today we'll have to talk about the morals, because our society, I'm talking about India as a society, no religion, no caste, no creed, nothing of the sort, has been the moral leader for the entire world. That is the reason why people from the Central Asia, people from the West, people from all over started coming to India. Why do you think the Cape of Good Hope is named Cape of Good Hope? Somebody was looking for India. How do you think America was discovered? So these are all things which happened. Why? They wanted to come to India, which was considered to be a great leader those days. But we have lost it. What happened? Now, that is where the other point which Shankar mentioned, namely the demographic situations, have come to play. Now, before I get into the response for this demography, I noted down this morning the famous speech by Thomas Jefferson in the State of Freedom, the Freedom of State Address, where he put forth a plea for an informed populace, educated to discuss policies. I'll just quote: "Every government degenerates when trusted to the rulers of the population. The people themselves, therefore, are its only safe depositories, and to render this even safer, their minds must be informed to a certain degree." That education which we are talking about comes here. "The influence over government must be shaped among all people. If every individual which composes their mass participates of the ultimate authority, the government will be safe. Institutions, law, and even constitutions are no protection against official ruthlessness unless they have the backing of an aroused public opinion. The more public opinion can be kept inert, the better chance therein that abuse of power will go uncorrected." And this is precisely what has happened, and the whole thing is a fortiori applicable to us, especially. We have just got out of the colonial regimen. I won't even call regime, but a regimen.